All right, here we go. Today we're talking about the Rocky Mountain Instinct Powerplay SL.
One thing you can learn about me, ain't nobody putting word like me. Can't drip, can't sauce like me. Ripping it up, I'm a major key. I am the one, not the two or the three. Get on my level if you wanna be better than ever. I got what I need. Pushing the limit, that's how it's gonna be.
This is Rocky's first attempt at a lightweight eMTB. They've slimmed down their proprietary Dyname motor for the first ever Dyname S4 Lite system. We've got bikes coming in around the low to mid 40-pound range. While that might not be the lightest eMTB out there, its weight disappears out on the trails. So what's new with the Instinct Powerplay SL? Well, this is a brand new platform, so all of it is new. We see a lot of new things, but we do see some tried and true Rocky Mountain technologies in this bike. So starting with the motor, we've got the proprietary Dyname S4 Lite motor. It offers 65 Newton meters of peak torque and up to 550 watts of assistance. It comes with a 480 watt-hour battery that is removable without having to pull the motor, but not like other batteries. The way Rocky handles this battery integration and swapping might be my favorite scenario out there. Because of where the Dyname motor sits, you can pull the battery out without having to remove the motor and without having to cut a giant hole in your down tube, compromising your frame stiffness. Speaking of batteries, there is an additional 314 watt-hour range extender available for this bike. That is a pretty big range extender, especially compared to the main battery size. Pretty cool to see. I really like the way Rocky handles their display and connectivity, or the e-integration. I hate installing an app for every bike I have to ride. So luckily there is no app for Rocky Mountain, and you can access all of your settings and all of your menus from the top tube mounted display. God bless them. Now let's throw a leg over this thing, ride some bikes. So starting with the motor performance, the Dyname S4 Lite quickly became one of my favorite lightweight eMTB motor designs. It offers plenty of peak torque and wattage to find itself near the top of the SL motors with, in my opinion, class-leading power delivery. I really like the subtle dimmer switch feel of this motor over the on-off feel of a lot of other motors. Not that that ends up being a huge matter at the end of the day, but it is nice to have that power gradually build up on you rather than it hit you in the face and take your wallet before you could even see it coming. Essentially, you get what you give when it comes to this one. You're not going to be able to phone it in and just let the motor do all of the work for you, although you're not going to be overworking yourself either. So by way of comparison, anecdotally, it feels pretty similar to the Shimano EP8RS, the Bosch Performance Line SX. It feels more powerful than the Fazua and way more powerful than the TQ. And I've been doing some rides with full power folks recently on this bike, and I'm not having to work myself into the ground to keep up. The reason you can't just phone it in is because the Dyname S4 Lite does prefer a bit of a quicker cadence in order to get the most out of it. So if you keep your spin above 75 or 80 RPMs, you're gonna be doing just fine. You'll get the most out of the motor. If you get into those high ranges, like 100 plus, you can get up to 550 watts of assistance, which is actually almost the highest out of all the lightweight e-bikes. As for the range on that 480 watt-hour battery, I'm actually pretty damn impressed with how long that lasts. I'm getting in the upper 3000s to low 4000s for vertical feet gained on a single charge in full boost. And I weigh about 190 pounds right now. So that range is pretty impressive for an SL eMTB. Depending on your conditions, you're gonna get about 7.5 to 9.3 feet per watt hour if you weigh the same as me. I did find an annoying little issue with it though. So when you're taking a break, sipping water, trash talking your friends, and you leave your foot on the pedal with a little bit of pressure on the pedal, the bike gets really mad at you. You'll get an error message, and if you do it for long enough, you'll have to get off the bike, shift into your easiest gear, recalibrate, and then get back on the bike, and it's a giant pain. I wish that was not the case, but it's easily avoided by not resting your feet on the pedals. But how else am I supposed to look cool? Also keep in mind, because this drives with an idler pulley and not your chain ring, you have one extra pulley in your whole chain cassette chainring mess, and a dirty or dry chain is way more noticeable on this bike than others. So keep your chain very clean, keep it very lubed, and you won't notice any drag or grinding. The second it gets dry or dirty, you'll start to notice some of that. Now talking about the bike itself, not the e-parts. The Instinct Powerplay SL is a great climber in the category, and it does a few things very well, including body position, front to back balance, and traction. So you pair those attributes with a great motor, and you've got yourself a top performer. First, let's dive into that suspension design. That mid-high pivot design excels at keeping the rear wheel pushing down into the dirt, so it's not skipping and hopping over obstacles very much. And that does two things on an e-bike. First, if your rear wheel isn't in the dirt, all the power in the world doesn't matter. that wheel will just spin in the air and you're gonna go nowhere. Secondly, it allows you to pedal through the obstacles instead of getting bounced off of your seat. And if you can pedal through those obstacles, you'll be able to take full advantage of the power from the motor. So the Instinct does both of those things very well. The second main attribute that makes the SL a great climbing e-bike is its body position. So e-bikes can climb up really steep grades. And if you've ever tried that, you've probably noticed the front end of the bike lifting up. And once that happens, you're kind of toast. You have little to no control over where the bike is going. So the Instinct's longer rear center ensures that there's more bike behind you. Proportionally, you're gonna have more weight on that front wheel. And the Instinct SL doesn't suffer from that e-bike floaty front end feeling quite as much as others I've ridden in the category. So this front to back balance makes those tougher climbs way more manageable. And when it comes to handling and maneuverability, the Instinct SL does ride a bit bigger and heavier than other bikes in the category. So if you find yourself in tough technical terrain, you'll have a little bit more of a wrestling match with the bike to get it up and over those big ledges or around those tight, slow, awkward sections. And that's really the only place where the Instinct SL doesn't shine on the climbs. So downhill, I did my first couple of rides on this bike completely blind. I had no idea what it was, how much travel it had, geometry, motor, power, anything. I really like doing rides like this without knowing everything because I feel like it gives me a more unbiased first impression of the bike. And on the Instinct, I would have guessed that it was bigger than it was. I would have guessed 150 or 160 mils of rear travel. And I think that goes to show you what the high pivot or the mid-high pivot effect is on a bike. And the Instinct has a couple other things going for it that do make it ride maybe burlier than it looks. So let's dive in. The Instinct SL's suspension design is really good at contouring the ground and providing traction. It doesn't get bounced around or knocked offline. It's great for that heels down type of riding. It doesn't quite erase the bumps like the new Altitude does. You're still going to feel the bumps, but you're not really going to care. They don't negatively affect the bike. And I think part of it's because as you compress the suspension, the rear of the bike is going to grow because of that mid-high pivot, that rearward axle path. And that's a big factor in how the Instinct manages rough terrain so well without having a ton of travel. And because the Instinct contours the ground so nicely, your wheels are going to be on the ground for most of the time. And this is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, you're going to have incredible amounts of traction and control in just a wide variety of terrain. It's almost impossible to get this thing to slide out or to get rattled too much. On the other hand, though, the Instinct isn't as spry or nimble feeling as other SL e-bikes. I'd describe it as sitting somewhere between the SLs, like the Heckler SL and the Rise, and the full power dogs like the Wild and the Vala. So maybe it's like a medium light, an ML. Especially when it comes to bunny hopping and unweighting and maneuvering the bike, you're not going to get too much love out of it trying to do that kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily the bike's weight, it's more the suspension design, the geo, that mid-high pivot design, and that's what keeps it happier on the ground than it does unweighting and getting airborne. So when it comes to other handling characteristics like cornering, the Instinct SL is amazing. It's really great in the corners. And I think it comes down to a combination of the traction on offer and the stability and how easily the bike leans over. In fact, I had to double and triple check that this thing was not a mullet because it leans over kind of like a mullet. And it makes it a ton of fun on all types of corners. Flat, bumpy, scary, smooth, supported. Instinct doesn't care. And maybe it's because the body position on the Instinct is slightly forward, and that's because of the longer chainstays, so proportionally you have a lot of bike behind you. And that makes it very easy to keep front wheel traction, as well as finding that center point between the wheels. So you have good front to back balance and equal traction through the corners. So it's tough to find yourself too far rearward on this bike, which I think is very beneficial for a lot of people because a lot of people tend to ride too far off the back of the bike. This almost forces you into a good body position. And that said, I don't think the chainstays are so long that they negatively affect the handling. The bike doesn't feel cumbersome or unwieldy. If anything, those long chainstays might just contribute to making it a little bit harder to bunny hop, a little bit less willing to get airborne. So what would I change about the Instinct SL? I would personally love to see a full power setting on this bike, kind of like Orbea did with the Rise. They gave you the 60 Newton meter standard RS mode or the 85 Newton meter RS Plus mode. I would love to see that on this bike. I think the motor could probably do it. So you get your 65 Newton meter light mode or you get your 85 Newton meter full power mode. And the range on this bike is good enough that you can afford to take that hit. For those shorter weeknight rides where you're rushed, you don't have a lot of time, pop it in the full power mode, rip a couple of laps really quick, and it's not like your ride's gonna be long enough to kill the battery anyway. For those bigger rides, longer weekend rides, put it in the lighter power mode and take advantage of a longer range. I don't think that would hurt this bike's performance. Don't know if it's possible, love to see it. Also, the dropper lever sucks. It doesn't hold the cable well. It doesn't work smoothly. It's hard to reach. I want a different dropper lever. That is all. All right, let's do a couple of comparisons. And this one's a little bit tricky because it sits somewhere between the SLs and the full powers. It's kind of an ML, but I do think it sits and shares more characteristics with the SLs than the full powers. So that's what we're gonna compare to. So starting with your Orbea Rise, specifically the LT. The Rise LT is probably the closest bike I can think of when compared to the Instinct SL. They both have that all-mountain, jack-of-all-trades approach out on the trails, and they'll both conquer a wide variety of terrain, including easy, flowy stuff, as well as rough and rugged trails. The Rise does have a slight advantage when it comes to the motor and its versatility because of the low and high power modes. So I do think it gets a bit of a win there. And if you're comparing the Rise in the low power mode to the Instinct in its only power mode, I think the Rise is gonna win on range. The Instinct SL does take the win in downhill capability and performance. It handles rough terrain quite a bit better without getting rattled. Now we're gonna talk about the Santa Cruz Heckler SL. So the Heckler SL is a pretty different beast. In my opinion, it prioritizes pedal bike handling over the E side of things, the power and the range. The Instinct SL wins both the power and the range battles in this showdown, and you would hope, because it is heavier and it does have a bigger battery, you would hope it wins those things. The Heckler SL certainly is the more lively and fun ride both up and down the mountain. It just has a poppier and more rewarding suspension feel and ride quality. Now lastly, the Uno Icky. These two are very different bikes. From a power and range standpoint, the Uno Icky is very close to a pedal bike experience. It's very light on the E in some good ways and others not so great. The Instinct SL wallops the Uno Icky on power and range. But the trade-off is the handling. So the Instinct is much heavier riding and more of a wrestling match. The Icky's handling, on the other hand, is very light and agile. Different strokes for different folks, but these two bikes are at opposite ends of the SL category for me. Who is the Instinct SL for? I like it for a couple different rider groups. First and foremost, I think the riders who will get the most out of this bike are the heels down and plow types. They aren't the most playful riders, they don't get the wheels off the ground all that often, but they don't mind tough and rugged terrain. And that's where the Instinct shines. It's not that the Instinct SL isn't fun, it's just not all that jibby for an SL eMTB. If you prioritize traction and contouring the ground though, you'll find it very fun. Another set of riders who I think will enjoy this are the people who are stuck between a full power and a lightweight. They don't know which to choose. And because this is maybe an ML, it might be the bike for you. It does find a very nice middle ground between those two categories. If you have friends in both categories, this one might bridge that gap very well. You won't kill your lightweight friends and you won't kill yourself trying to hang out with the full power guys. I also think riders who want to do really big rides on an e-bike will like this, especially those who want to do it on a lighter weight e-bike that doesn't have a 900 watt-hour battery that weighs more than my 5-year-old, because this offers the ability to swap batteries mid-ride without too much fuss. It's not quite as easy as some others, but it doesn't compromise frame rigidity in the name of ultra-fast battery swaps. And then you can factor in that 314 watt-hour range extender, and you've got some pretty good options for doing big rides. So that's gonna do it for the Instinct SL. We'll see you next time.